So please check this out again in the show notes. The idea of using rock wool or rock sole or mineral wool insulation, those things are really, really, really expensive. When I was going through getting materials for my studio, I looked at it. I read a lot of reviews online and everyone's saying, hey, rock wool is like the industry standard. And by the way, I have nothing against rock wool whatsoever. So I'm not a hater, but I realized after doing some research and I heard some studies about this, some of the studies have suggested that rock wool and some of the others that I just mentioned, they're just about as effective as that pink stuff, the pink cheap stuff. Now, of course, you have to buy the right version of the pink stuff. But again, I've heard that the actual decibel reduction is nearly the same, and in many instances at a fraction of the cost. So again, that's why I want to have you look at the show notes so you can verify for yourself. There's a gentleman that goes through this whole big presentation and gives you data, and he actually has information on his site about the actual decibel reduction with respect to rock wool versus the pink stuff. My goal, again, is not to denigrate rock wool or any of the other brands out there. My goal is to actually help you maybe have more of a cost-effective way of controlling your sound. So please check that out. You may save yourself a lot of money. All right. So my point being is check out some of the pink stuff and get that in your walls, and you will reduce your decibels between the two rooms substantially. Next thing, there's a technique out there where you double drywall your room. And the recommendation is a 5/8 inch drywall thickness. So you have 2 layers of 5/8 inch drywall back to back. So you have one thick wall. But what happens is that when sound is traveling through those particles, they're slowed down substantially, the sound waves. And then it hits the second layer of that drywall and they're slowed down or absorbed substantially, or that energy is mitigated or reduced. So double drywalling is like an amazing way of reducing sound. A friend of mine happens to be an architect, and he does like a lot of work for like Starbucks and things like that. And he talks about the fact that that is a technique that they use in building the old double drywall technique. Another thing that he mentioned, which I also read about, is using acoustic glue between the 2 layers of drywall. So yeah, you can just go with 2 layers of drywall. But to further sweeten the sound reduction properties, you can use acoustical glue in between the 2 surfaces. So it's like a little sandwich going on there. You have one piece of drywall, a layer of glue, and then you have the other drywall, and that's kind of how it's set up. Again, I'm not providing an endorsement for anything today, but I can tell you, if you look around, you won't have to look around very long to find out that green glue happens to be the industry standard for this acoustic glue that goes in between the drywall. Fair warning, green glue, in my opinion, is just ridiculous in price. But I was talking to my architect friend. He's like, oh, yeah, that's what they use out there in a lot of these large commercial facilities, whether it be like a theater or some type of building where they're trying to substantially reduce noise between one area or the other. So he's like, yeah, that's exactly what they use. Green glue is a bit different in that it kind of behaves as like a putty substance, so it never dries to like a glue or a tacky substance. It's more of a kind of a spongy thing that remains spongy for years and years and years. So what you have is like a shock absorber between the drywall. So when sound comes through, according to green glue, when it hits the green glue area, that sound wave energy is transformed into a very, very slight bit of heat. Nothing that's dangerous, nothing that's going to set anything on fire, but very, very small amount of heat. And then there's the other piece of drywall. Again, that whole apparatus allows for a substantial reduction in sound. So yeah, check that out. Do your research. There are some competitors to green glue. But after watching a few videos online and doing a lot of research, it seems like no one has come up with the same type of formula as those guys. All right, next tip. There are these mechanisms of which you can hang your drywall on the wall with, meaning if you have your wood studs behind your walls, there are these acoustic clips that create kind of a floating situation to where the drywall does not have a direct contact with the wood studs. So in other words, as sound is traveling through the wall to the drywall, the sound actually hits these clips, and on these clips there are these small, tiny acoustic pads, and it reduces the sound energy that's coming through that wall. It sounds a little crazy and maybe confusing if you're not following me, but again, just go online, just Google drywall acoustic clips and channels. You'll see a lot of systems out there for hanging drywall into your new studio space. Again, fair warning, those things are crazy expensive. Just to kind of give you a personal story here, I was going to go that route with these things, but man, looking at how much square footage I have, I just decided that I was not going to go with these clips. I think the clips alone were going to cost me like $600. That's not to mention any of the other materials. And I'm like, nah, I'm not doing that. But again, you may have a small space, maybe a vocal booth, where that will make a lot of sense. All right, next thing. You can also use, if you're building your space or remodeling a space, something called putty pads that will go behind your electrical outlets in your room. In your house right now or in your apartment, I don't know if you know this, but if you ever put your ear down to an electrical outlet and there's something happening on the other side of that wall, like a washing machine or a kitchen or whatever, you can hear quite a bit from the other side of the room through an electrical outlet. Well, that's because the electrical outlet has a whole bunch of little small open spaces in the back of it, wiring and things like that. So the sound that's coming from the back side of that or the other side of the room can travel very easily into the space that you're in. So if you do all of these great things, let's say you're building a new environment or a new room for your studio or whatever, if you don't secure your outlets, you will have a lot of bleeding of sound from the outside into your room just by your electrical outlets. So these putty pads are like these, I guess they're like 8x8 squares. And what you do is when your walls are down, you will wrap these on the back of your outlets, your light switches, your electrical receptacles. In my studio, I just realized that I'm going to put an HDMI cable up for a larger monitor system. So I need to put one on that little HDMI box. But the point is you wrap your electrical outlet or light switch boxes with this on the backside so that air cannot come through that box outside of the little small holes in the front. You'll be surprised at how much sound energy can travel through those little tiny boxes. So again, that may be worth looking into. All right, last tip. And this one I'm pretty excited about. This is one that I'm doing in my studio right now. I never really heard about it from a lot of producers and things like that, but whatever. I'll mention it to you guys today. And it's called mass loaded vinyl. MLV, mass loaded vinyl. And again, this is something that you want to Google. Of all the years that I've been talking to musicians and going to studios and been on online forums, I never heard it from anybody. I don't know why. And it's not like some secret. It's been around for many, many years. But I just never heard any musicians talking about this stuff or producers talking about this stuff. In short, mass loaded vinyl is this incredibly heavy, yet very thin and pliable sheet of vinyl that you can actually hang on your ceiling or on your walls, and it absorbs a large amount of sound energy. Now, it comes in different thicknesses, and hopefully I get my math right here. I think, and you know what, let me not guess here. Let me look it up real fast here so I can give you the right numbers behind this stuff. So let me back up here. So mass loaded vinyl is black. It's like a big roll. And the one that I have here for my studio, I believe it's about 4 feet in width And I mean, it comes in very long rolls. You can get like 50 feet, you can get 20 feet. I can get shorter rolls like 10 feet. You can get up to like 100 feet of this stuff, depending on how large your space is. But let me give you an example and some numbers here as to how this stuff works. So they have this stuff in varying thicknesses. So if you have 1/16 of an inch of this stuff, 1 square foot of this stuff weighs a half pound. So think about that. 1/16 of an inch, a square foot of that, it weighs a half pound. So now imagine that you have a whole wall of this stuff. You can see how heavy and how dense that is. Let's say you have a 10 by 10 foot wall. That's like 50 pounds of soundproofing on your wall, if my math holds up there in that example. So if you think about it from that vantage point, that's pretty substantial. So this stuff, mass-loaded vinyl, it's used in theater rooms in houses. It's used in movie theaters. It's used in apartments. It's used in conference rooms. It's used in hotels. The thicker version of the stuff, and it can go up in thickness, it can be used on the floor. So before you put your carpet down, let's say you're on the second floor, your studio is upstairs in your home, and you're making a lot of noise for people downstairs, you can buy the stuff and lay it down underneath your carpet, and it will mitigate and stop a lot of noise. Again, if you think about hotels and things like that, that's exactly what they have. So this stuff is amazing. The cool part about this is if you have a space where it's all built out and you're not doing reconstruction or doing the demo, it may be kind of ugly, but you can actually tack this stuff on an existing wall. So in other words, if you just go to the room of your studio, you can actually layer it on the outside of that wall. And from what I understand, this stuff can be painted and things like that. And there may be some ways that you can kind of dress it up so it doesn't look super ugly. But again, this allows for very, very good sound absorption. So yeah, check it out. It may be worth the investment. Fair warning, this stuff is not cheap. But if you're just using a little bit for like a vocal booth or whatever, I mean, it may be worth the investment. And you may find that it's a better soundproofing tool than the traditional foam squares or even Roxol or rock wool or whatever. And the sweet part about the things that I mentioned today, if you are able to stack some of these soundproofing measures, that I believe is where you really start to cash in. Meaning, let's say you have, the mass loaded vinyl, and then on top of that you have your sound panels, and then maybe you have your bass traps or you have your sound diffuser. These things working in tandem will actually give you a substantial leg up. All right, man, I hope this show was helpful for you today. Check out those show notes. There's a lot there, more than usual. And again, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. Check us out on Facebook or on IG, Success with Music. Hey, we'll check you on the next episode.